Welcome to the Interior Design Beat podcast, where you will hear candid commentary on various interior design subjects and topics, including the good, the bad, and the ugly, telling you like it really is. Hello, this is Steve Adamco. Welcome to another episode of the Interior Design Beat podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about trends, as in Trends version 2. In other words, an extension of the podcast I did on trends prior to this one. But we've got some additional thoughts, ideas, and comments for you. All right, starting off, I should say right away that trends are big business. It causes people to want to keep up with the trends or cause dissatisfaction with what they have. And that's why it's important to design according to a person's lifestyle and tastes and wants and needs and desires. In other words, to be a true reflection of that person so that it can be long lasting, because interior design is expensive. This is not like changing your wardrobe. So you don't need to be current or fashionable in a sense as far as the trends go. You really need to be tailored to you. But in the midst of all this, most people really don't know what their style is. They haven't delved deeply enough into, well, what is it that I like and need and want and desire? They haven't asked the deep questions to unearth and to expose the deeper core of themselves, so to speak. Again, I like to bring up the analogy of archaeology. You want to dig out the hidden treasure in the person. That's what I do as a professional interior designer, is to dig out those hidden treasures. How do I dig that out? By asking very excellent questions that delve deeper and deeper and deeper into things so that we can really formulate and orchestrate an interior that is like, wow, is that ever a capsulation of that individual? And most people will go, wow, I never knew that about myself. Well, yeah, we find out by asking the right questions so that your interior design can be a real reflection of you, or a mirror, as it were, of your lifestyle. So it does take some effort. It does take some preparatory work. You know, it goes back to my 6 Ps: prior, proper, preparation, prevents, or performance. Always. And then ask the right questions to get the right answers in order to deliver exactly and precisely the right results. And another important point is you don't want your design to appear dated, because when you follow trends, that is basically like the herd instinct. A few years later, it's like, oh yeah, you were part of that movement. You were part of that herd. You were part of that trend. You were part of that fad. And it's so obvious when you start incorporating things that are relative to your personality, then you break that cycle and you create the magic of you, because there's only one of you in the entire world. There's no one else that is like you. Now, there might be people who are similar, but nobody like you. You are one of a kind, so it's important to create interiors that are one of a kind, tailored to you, just like an haute couture dress. All right? Just like a dress designed, tailored, sewn, fabricated in Paris just for you. So take that idea with you that, hey, if I had $30,000, $60,000, $100,000 for a dress just tailored to me and my body exactly, precisely, that makes me look absolutely fantastic and gorgeous, you would do it if you have the money, right? So take the same concept with you in conceiving what an interior design is. Yet, interior design is very multifaceted and multi-complex. It can be as complex as a haute couture dress. Absolutely. And the fine work and all the work and the hours, hundreds of hours that go into producing it. But the concept is that it's so you that it couldn't be for anybody but you. From a historical perspective, can you imagine if the Greeks did the Parthenon by fads and trends? Well, this time we're going to do it this color and then we're going to change this and change that. That would not be the most magnificent architectural edifice building that has ever existed. The Parthenon on the Acropolis. That was so masterful that why would you do anything different? If it's so masterful of a design, whether it be interiors or whatever, then why would you ever change it to be second best? If it's the epitome, if it's a gold medal performance, there's no reason to do that. And that's why it takes time and effort to do things right from the beginning, from the get-go. Do it right once. Okay, you can always change it with little things that add little things, but you don't have to tear down the whole edifice, tear down the whole building and build a new one as if building was a fad. These are part and parcel of what constitutes classic, wonderful, enduring, long-lasting design of any sort that has lasted for hundreds of years. I mean, classic is classic. Let's say the bone structure of an athlete, of a gymnast. You don't change their bone structure because, well, this is then long legs are in versus short legs and all that. I mean, there are people who are of any stature who do phenomenal performances in the Olympics. So you just don't mess with the principles and the foundations. You just never do. You build on it. You expound on it, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Why would you do that? And one of the things that it doesn't fascinate, like in a sense puzzles me. Gray's been in the limelight for so long. It's like, gray, it's gray. We want to see gray, do something different. It's like everybody acts like, including some of the designers, well, we're in the dungeon of gray. We're handcuffed by gray. We're shackled by gray. It's like, give me a break. Who's pushing that narrative? I mean, all the colors in the world, you don't have to do that. You don't have to follow that. So what's a gray's a trend? It's still a neutral, okay? Black, gray, and white, they're all neutrals. They aren't colors per se, okay? When you neutralize colors or mix complementaries, you get a grayed down version. But you don't see a color wheel and say, that's white, gray, and black. No, that's all relative to value, how light or dark something is. Just like a black and white photo. Do you call black and white photo a color photo? Heck no. So why are we calling this color? It's not. It might have an underlying tinge of color. But if anybody came up to you with a black and white photograph and said, look at the color photograph I took, they say, what? That's not color. So anyway, sometimes whatever goes on out there in the design world is like, what the heck? I mean, where are these people from? All right. One of the things that puzzles me is what designers say and what they say when they're being interviewed, like relative to trends. They say, well, we're seeing this and we're seeing that. And I'm thinking, okay, are you a designer or are you a follower type of designer? Are you one who makes things happen or one who watches things happen? And so they're always forever saying, we're seeing this happen and we're seeing this come be more fat. We're seeing this and we're seeing that. It's almost like they're spectators watching a parade. They're seeing the parade come down the street, but they don't know who started the parade. They don't know what was the impetus for the parade. They were not a mover and shaker of the parade. They were not an instigator of the parade. They did not design the parade. They had almost nothing to do with the parade, and they're just saying, well, we're seeing this and we're seeing that as a trend. So what I think about a lot is the fact that you can be those that make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder, what happened? And a lot of these designers we're the ones that watch things happen. They're not the ones making things happen. And by the way, since when should you be taking what's happening, coming down the street, and then applying it to your individual clients? I always see there's a problem with that. Why don't you create something that's unique to you? That's what this whole field is about. Design and creation, not taking things like off the rack and applying it to your clients. You're supposed to be creating something new. So I find it really puzzling, and I'm wondering really what kind of designers these people are, if they call themselves designers. I mean, would Michelangelo say, "Oh man, that's new"? I mean, you can go back to in history and look at all the things that have been done by the greatest people who ever lived and walked the planet in terms of artists, painters, designers, architects, interior designers. And they're all based on principles that go as far back as the Greeks and the orders of architecture and proportions and everything like that. That is part of what makes things beautiful. It's just like music and music theory. And I think a lot of designers, they just want to be different just for the sake of being different, saying because I'm different, I'm creative. I don't think so. Maybe sometimes it works, but a lot of times it doesn't. It's just like you're just trying to be loud and get attention, but it's not something that endures. It's a flash in the pan, and then it's gone. It's a bit of fireworks, and then they're gone. You go home. Okay, nothing to look at anymore. So that's what enduring design is. If you study the history of design, you'll understand what enduring is. You'll understand what real design is. You'll understand what shape and form and proportion really is. It's just like the proportions of the human body. Do we go around changing those? No, not really. Not unless you want to go from a human to an ape. All right? But that's seemingly what some of these people do out there, just to get attention, just to stand out and say, "Oh, aren't I different?" Different doesn't mean anything, okay? For the sake of being different, for the sake of being front cover news. And a lot of these people are fashion people. Some of these people got into interior design via the fashion industry. Well, I love fashion, but I came in it straight from the design field, right from the beginning in design, in architecture, in interiors. And yeah, fashion can be used and be a springboard to things in the interior. But recently I listened to a podcast where 3 ladies were on that were in the fashion industry and then migrated to interior design. So I still find that fascinating. But, I love fashion. Haute Couture, one of my favorite designers, fashion designers, is the late Karl Lagerfeld. Wow, what a guy. What a iconic designer. He's just the epitome of a designer who has had long standing and is creative over and over and over again. But haute couture, there's a lot of time, effort, and money that goes into haute couture to make a fine dress. I mean, you're talking about, $30, $60, $100,000. You're talking about a lot of time and effort and hundreds of hours that go into the production, fabrication of a dress of that level and quality. Well, it's the same thing with interior design. One you put on and you can look in a mirror and see yourself in all one viewpoint, or you can get in front of those triplex mirrors or those triple mirrors that will show you the front and the side, and you can turn around and see the back. But interior design is just as complex, if not more so, with all the details that is a walk-in environment. Now you're surrounded by it, and you can move throughout the space. You don't do that in a dress, in an haute couture dress, but the same principles are there. So I have no problem with incorporating fashion in interior design and play it back the other way too. So there's always dressmaker details and all kinds of details and hardware, and you can take anything from earrings, necklaces, bracelets, dresses, shoes. I mean, the colorations, the combinations, and you can create interiors from that. You can create custom furniture from that in a way. And it's been done. And like I said, you can translate things from fashion to interiors, but you have to know how to translate it, kind of like translating one language into another. But I will make a special point here is that when you have a custom dress or haute couture dress, it's fitted to the individual precisely. And like interiors, they need to be fitted to the individual. What woman wants to go to a party and find another woman with the same dress? No, you don't want that. And so interiors being such an expensive, I mean, they are $100,000, $250,000, $60,000, $30,000, whatever you want to say. It's the same as a high-end dress. So make it custom, make it unique, make it one of a kind. Create a composition that is different. Yeah, there might be some similarities of other things out there, but make it unique. I mean, it's almost like taking a dress off the rack, but then customize, add some things to it, put some embellishments on it. So it looks like it's not even like, where'd you get that? Oh, it's custom, or it's been customized. It's been an off the rack dress, but customized. So it doesn't look like it's off the rack. You get what I'm saying here? And that can be done in so many ways in interior design. So what I want to expound on is that when you have a dress made like that, it's the fitting, it's the tailoring. They take a little bit in here and a tuck in there. You go for several fittings to make it precisely you and tailored and fitted to you. So interior design, in my estimation, should be exactly the same way as high-end fashion. We tailor it, we fit it, we go in for several fittings to make adjustments, to make sure it is in alignment with you in every aspect, your lifestyle, your personality, your likes, your dislikes. Well, obviously you're going by your likes, not your dislikes, so you keep the dislikes out of there, but everything that you love that makes you feel good and wonderful and fantastic and marvelous, as Billy Crystal would say, marvelous. That's what you want. So that's why I like to use analogies like these and references, to help people understand how we merge these things together, how we take something and translate it into something else. And let's not forget lighting, mood, ambiance. So a lot of things, like from music to movies to fashion, can all be springboards to use as idea generators for interiors. But again, you always want it to be the stamp, so to speak, of the client, but the stamp of the client is done via the designer who knows how to put themselves into the shoes of the client and do the work with their expertise. Plus, any level and amount of communication between the designer and the client. So communication is imperative. It's essential if you want to get that unique expression. Every client should get a unique expression of them, period. Especially if someone's going to call themselves an interior designer. You follow the trends and the fads, I think you're doing a disservice to the client. Or Mr. or Mrs. Client, they're doing a disservice to you. Now, a lot of this stuff can factor into low self-esteem. Well, I got to feel like I'm somebody, so I got to have this look that's like them so I can feel like I'm like that. No. Forget that stuff. You're you. Rise up. Be you. Don't be timid. That's ridiculous. And an important element is you always want to create interiors that are emotional, tactile, visual, intellectual, spiritual. So let me repeat that. You always want to create rooms that address and speak to all the senses, the emotion, the intellect, the tactile, the visual, the spiritual, by picking up as many things as you can and hitting as many of the senses as possible. So a lot of this comes down to nuance. So when you incorporate all those elements and you hit on all those senses, then you create an interior that is engaging. Engaging. That's what ambiance is. Now, one of the things that happens when you encounter a trend or engage in a trend is that you engage with a herd mentality, with a mass movement. And interior design is supposed to be unique, tailored, and personal to you. Unique, tailored, and personal to you. You do not get it with a trend. You do not get it with a fad. You do not get it with a herd mentality. So again, it's like fashion. It's like the women that were from the fashion industry that turned into interior designers or decided to go in interior design. So take it just like we're using fashion, fads, trends, interior design. To use the same analogy, it's like haute couture. It's design tailored to fit you and you alone. So in a sense, we're not talking about off the rack stuff. We're talking about something that's tailored personally to you. So I still want to use that analogy, even though, yeah, you can buy furniture and whatnot in a furniture store. I'm using the haute couture analogy for a purpose so that you don't fall into the trap of getting what everybody else has, to make it more unique and personal, and to have a little bit of courage to go forward to do what you want to do instead of feeling safe that you've got to follow somebody when they're not you and you're not them. See, I'm talking about it in such a personal way because it's your home. It's where you live. It's where you relax. It's where you entertain. It's where you dream. It's where you recuperate. It's where you recreate. It's supposed to be this support environment that you come back to at the end of the day. And when it comes to the finances it takes to do an interior design, it's not something that you take lightly. I mean, even when I'm working with people that are multimillionaires, I look at their finances as an investment. I don't say, well, since you've got so much money, we can spend so much money, even though we can and we do, but we don't do it in a frivolous manner. And so, I treat clients that aren't multimillionaires in the same way that I treat the ones that do have a lot of money, and that is respect their money as an investment. We make sure that even if we spend more than the client thought we would for something, it's always with a view toward a better environment or something that's going to pay dividends and garner enjoyment for them in the future and for a long, long time. So in a sense, it becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper over time. And that's the way people look at it, even in business, as an investment. And it's a good investment that pays off in so many ways, in multiple ways, again and again and again and again. It's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving when you do it right. An important point when dealing with trends is that whenever you deal with trends and fads, in a certain sense, they're short-lived. Short-lived can be, 5 years, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, few months, whatever. It's kind of relative in a way. But when you deal with fads and trends, you're always dealing with shifting sand. It's almost like you're building your house on sand instead of a firm foundation or a foundation of rock. The rock and the firm foundation are the principles of design that constitutes wonderful, fantastic, marvelous design. The other stuff is like cotton candy. You can't survive on that. Another great idea or concept to think about is that you need to get out of your comfort zone in order to get into your comfort zone. Let me explain what I mean by that. Sometimes you have to step outside of the comfort to find your true comfort. Like, this is what I've been missing. And I was afraid to do it. I was afraid to step out. I was afraid to go color after living with beige walls so long. I got so comfortable with it. So, it's just so nondescript that it's like there and it's not there. It wasn't impacting me in any meaningful way anymore. And so we get complacent, and a lot of interiors look very complacent. And so sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone into a higher level, and then you'll realize, oh my gosh, why didn't I get to this higher level sooner? So think of it like, a suit. You get into a certain level of suit, and then somebody convinces you that, using the L'Oreal principle, I'm worth it. Yeah, you are. To invest in some higher level, higher quality things, and then you put on a suit that's like maybe twice what you're used to, and you think, oh my gosh, I never realized how wonderful I feel in this. Oh my gosh, I feel much more confident. I feel sexier, I feel, whatever. Let's just talk about a suit for a man or a woman. Okay. I feel so much handsomer, sexier. I feel more confident. I feel like, wow, it's just the way the fabric drapes on my body and how it feels and the luxuriousness of the fabric and how it's soft and supple and it just moves with me so well. I feel like it's part of me and I'm part of it. It's just like one moving symphony. So think of that, and you start moving up, you realize, oh my gosh, look what I've been missing all this time. Yes, look what you've been missing all this time. But in a lot of cases, you got to be thinking right. You got to think accurately. And then in a lot of cases, you got to get the right designer that can lead you into that promised land. You've got to get the right designer that can lead you into your promised land, where they put themselves in your shoes and do it with their expertise or work alongside you using their expertise to make the dream and the vision become a true reality. And the other thing is that sometimes trends, you get into a trend and you actually get, or your environment gets uglier. It just doesn't resonate with you. It doesn't, kind of like a hairstyle that somebody says, oh, this is a new hairstyle, but you don't look good in it. Or this is a new fashion, but you don't look good in it. See, now you've gone from looking wonderful to looking not nearly as wonderful, where you need to go from wonderful to super wonderful, to marvelous, to fantastic. You see? You got to keep stepping up. Another thing that came up in one of the podcasts I listened to that they were talking about trends is that they said, now we're moving into emotional design. Well, for crying out loud, human beings are emotional and then logical. In other words, they make decisions emotionally and then they back it up by logic. People are not Spock from Star Trek. Well, that's not logical. They're not. And so I'm thinking like, what the heck? You are now realizing that design should be emotional and should tap into the emotions as well as the intellect. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just don't get it, where this is the way human beings have been for millennia. So why are we all of a sudden in this super enlightened age thinking like, oh, now design's moving into the emotional category? Well, it should have been there all along. It's all meant to be tapping into all the senses, like I said earlier in the podcast. I mean, these trends come like somebody's doing something, like some other power is making this happen. So in a lot of cases, I want to know who is directing this trend. Who's pushing everybody's buttons? Is there somebody behind some curtain somewhere that nobody knows that's causing this to happen, that all of a sudden other designers are saying, we're seeing this, we're seeing this. Wow, we're seeing this happening more often. Wow, you got to do that. No. I mean, it's just like this, where's this thing coming from? This unseen force moves on everybody with a trend that now, for the last 5 years, we've been kind of imprisoned in the fact that everything is gray, but we don't know who's imposing this on us. We don't know who's dictating this to us. We seem powerless to free ourselves. I mean, that's the ridiculousness of these trends and fads. Some of them are just there for marketing purposes. Somebody pushes something in order to make a gob of money off of people who don't know what is solid and what's fluff. And one of the other things that one of the ladies brought up in that design podcast was that, texture is coming back, or whatever, a trend now. Well, texture should always be a trend because you've got the whole gamut of texture, from the smoothness of a baby's butt to silk to wool to tapestry to the most roughest fabric there is, or the most textured fabric, I should say, the most dimensional fabric that there is. And tactile is referring to touch. I mean, humans are pretty much involved in the tactile, touchy-feely realm, the touchy-feely realm. So why should that be a trend? It should not be a trend. It should be something that's in the mix all the time. Yeah, just some stuff just needs to be there all the time. It's not like, well, we're going to put this ingredient in there, but it should be the ingredient of every good design, not rotating through and around, like, well, we'll do it this year, but we won't do it next year. Doesn't make any sense. in some of these cases. And some trends, they just look, when you look at it, you think, that's just a trend for a trend's sake. They don't realize they just made their house uglier. It's like, where was their head? Where was their brains when they did that? Oh, well, all the fashion magazines are doing it. Well, that doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because it's in a magazine doesn't give it credence, doesn't give it credibility. Just because it's in a magazine, shoot, anybody can put anything in a magazine nowadays. There are hundreds and hundreds of magazines. It's not like days of old where you had a handful of the mainstays. I mean, you got every magazine for everything under the sun, and they can put any kind of dumb stuff in there they want to. And they do, because they want to increase their readership. Well, let's give them something new so that they'll buy more of our magazines. And then the people advertise in the magazine, so that we're going to put this in there so they can buy more of our product. Some of it is just approached from a very selfish point of view. We got to give them something different because otherwise they'll get bored. Well, that's a problem. Don't get bored so quick. That's another thing, like short attention spans. Geez, that is just idiotic. What for? Wherefore? How come you have such a thing, short attention span? Like, there's a problem there, I think. I mean, all things being equal, okay? People sit down and watch a movie for 2.5 hours, and then they can't keep their attention for like 5 seconds. Oh, 5 seconds and they're off. Like, have some consistency, have some tenacity, have some, what's the other word I want to say? Stick-to-itiveness, or some steadfastness. There's a lot of different words I could use, but hopefully you get the point. Now, one of the other topics that was brought up was starting with the emotion and then let it lead into the aesthetics. And in a sense, that is true. So you're starting out not with what it's going to look like, but what it's going to feel like, what it needs to feel like. And then that feeling can be directed into the aesthetic realm. So instead of having something that just looks nice, it has an emotional connection to it. So in a lot of cases, it's best to start out with the emotion. Like, how do you want it to look is important. How do you want it to feel? So how do you want it to feel is just as important, if not in some cases, more important than what do you want it to look like? Because when you embed the emotion into the aesthetics, then you have something that's working together, like both hemispheres of the brain, the analytical, the creative, the analytical, the emotional, the left bank of an engine working with the right bank of an engine. It gives it power, not just it looks nice, but it doesn't have any feeling. It doesn't have any emotion. You want it to have emotion. You don't want it to not have emotion. Because when you look at, love, it's an emotion. Yes, it's intellectual too, but the base of it is emotion. And so we humans are emotional, and you got to tap into the emotion. So many interiors, they don't look like they emanate emotion. They don't have that it factor, that substance, that like bravado or whatever. They just don't touch people emotionally. And that's kind of like, it's dry, kind of dead in a way. It doesn't have any spirit to it in a way. It just doesn't tap into things that make us feel wonderful. And the feeling part is so important. The ambiance is so important, but they go hand in hand. They're like a left hand and a right hand. It's easier and more pleasant to hug somebody with both arms, both hands, or whatever, or, just a lot of things that it just comes in super handy. So you don't want it just kind of one-sided. So anyway, got to hit with the intellect, got to hit with the emotions, the tactile sensations, the touch, and then maybe an interior that makes you kind of contemplate, like, wow, what is it that sets this so uniquely apart? And so a lot of people can't put their finger on it. They don't know what it is, but the expert knows what it is because he's the one that embedded that in there. Like a little gem embedded in places that nobody would know would house a gem. But the whole idea is to make the occupants be like gems in their settings or their environment. All right. So those are some extra thoughts, comments, observations, things that other people have said that I think needed to be responded to or agreed with or countered. And so hopefully this has given some different thoughts and ideas on trends, different tangents, different ways we need to look at things so that we create interiors that are conducive for the client and that you as the client get what you should have, which means typically something other than the trends. So it's important to be individualistic, to be personal, to let your own personality shine through. You may like certain aspects of things, but don't get too carried away with trends because they typically don't last that long. And then later on, it becomes a dated look and it's not unique enough and individual enough. So it's always important to live in a home and a house that is individualized for you. And, if you ever move out of it, somebody can do what they want to do. But while you're living in it, you should get what you want and not do things just for resale value or, live in a house for 5 or 10 years and say, well, I'm doing it because, this is what's selling now. Well, that could be different later on because, again, the trends, they move a lot based on market and sales and other things. So there's a lot of factors at work sometimes that are really not conducive to wonderful design because people want to sell things. Nothing wrong with that, but we have to look at things from a long-term view. And for the sake of longevity, for the sake of classic design, for the sake of design that endures, that is wonderful to look at, kind of like the Parthenon, if you will. It was wonderful to look at when it was constructed, and here it is thousands of years later. But thousands of years later, the Parthenon is still an object of beauty, even in this current condition. If we all were able to see it when it was built, it probably would have been phenomenal. But even in its semi-ruined state, it's still gorgeous, and you can see how wonderful it was. And parts of it are in the Elgin marbles in England. So, yeah, that's what you look at, and you see the beauty of form, line, shape, proportion, color, and texture. That is what we need to always work with and keep in mind. And that should be the guide for everything in design because it's so enduring and it's based on solid principles. All right. Well, this has been another great podcast, and hopefully you've enjoyed it and learned some more things out of it and things that would help you in being bold and individualistic instead of being a follower of what everybody else is doing. Forget the herd instinct. That's no big deal. That's for cattle. It's not for human beings, in my opinion. And I think if we celebrate that individual quality and the uniqueness of every person, I think people will be a lot happier because there's so much conformity in the world in other places. And your home is your haven. It's your castle. It's really the only place that you can truly control. So that's why I'm adamant about pursuing the individual, unique approach. Don't worry about what other people think. It's you, it's your life, it's your enjoyment, and it's your residence, and it's your home. So be much more thoughtful about it. If there's anything you can take away from this podcast, is that just be more thoughtful and thinking through things. Consider the long-term effects of all your decisions because they all have to come together and they all affect each other in ways that a lot of people don't recognize until it's too late. Well, we don't want that. We want things set up for success from the very beginning. All right. Well, everybody have a great day. Enjoy it. And we'll talk to you on the next podcast.